Hey, guys, tonight we're leaving behind the cozy comforts of modern life and setting sail for one of the most brutal, freezing, and unforgiving regions of the medieval world, the North Sea. Storm-tossed, bone-chilling, and relentlessly cruel. Forget seaside charm or romantic Viking fantasies. This is saltwater survival, and you're not ready. So before you get too cozy, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. And drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. The first thing you notice isn't the smell, though that comes soon enough. It's the cold, the kind that seeps through wool, through skin, through bone, the kind of cold that doesn't wait for winter. It just is, constant, unmoving. The sea doesn't welcome you. It tolerates your presence, the way a bear tolerates a buzzing fly, until it doesn't. You're standing on a patch of pebbled shore in the year 1282, somewhere along the coast of what is now northern England, or maybe Denmark or Friesland. Doesn't really matter. The wind's the same in all of them. Screaming. There's no harbor, no docks, just a few warped boats wedged into the muck, like exhausted animals waiting to die. The village behind you is more suggestion than settlement. Huts built from driftwood and desperation, their roofs sagging under centuries of disappointment. Smoke leaks sideways from holes in the thatch, stolen immediately by the wind. It smells like salt, fish, dung, and the faint, lingering rot of things that died here last season and never quite left. You're already soaked. Not from the sea, not yet, but from the air itself. The mist doesn't fall. It invades. It doesn't let you dry. Your skin is slick. Your hair is clumping. And your boots, if you're lucky enough to have them, are filled with freezing mud. You try to breathe deep and immediately regret it. The cold stabs your lungs like tiny knives dipped in salt. Your nose runs. Your eyes water. But there's no wiping them. Your hands are wrapped in something vaguely resembling gloves. More rag than garment, more mildew than wool. You pull them tighter anyway, because you have work to do. There is always work to do. And in the North Sea, work is life. Or at least the thin, miserable parody of life that ends with your name carved on a splintered plank facing the waves. This isn't a world of trade winds and star charts. There are no polished decks or glossy sails. The boat you're stepping into is a hand-built wreck of tarred planks and hand-forged nails, barely seaworthy, but good enough to gamble with. You balance on the slick gunwale, the wood cold and wet beneath your foot, and duck under the low-slung yardarm. The sail above you is stiff with salt, patched more times than you can count, flapping violently, like it resents being woken. Your crew is silent. They're not interested in introductions. One of them spits overboard, a thick wad of phlegm whipped sideways by the wind before it hits the water. That's the closest thing you'll get to a greeting. Out here, language is inefficient. Words freeze on the tongue and sink like stones. Everything you need to know is communicated through gesture, grunt, and the kind of eye contact that says, "Don't die today, I need help rowing." There are no engines, no compasses, and no guarantees. Just muscle, instinct, and the vague hope that the fog will lift before something huge and sharp appears out of it. Something made of rock or teeth. The tide is rising. That's good or bad. It depends on what kind of gods you've angered this week. The boat groans as it's pushed off the shore, sliding into the surf with the reluctant heave of something that's done this 100 times and knows it will hurt. The water grabs the hull with greedy fingers, slapping against it in cold, wet applause. You feel the weight of it under you. Alive, moody, ancient. The wind catches the sail, the boat shudders, and just like that, you're leaving land behind. There's no horizon anymore, just gray. Above, below, all around. The sky and sea have conspired to erase the line that separates them. The boat rocks hard to port, and your stomach lurches in protest. The man next to you pukes into his sleeve, wipes his mouth with a gesture so practiced it's almost graceful, then goes back to pulling rope. No one reacts. You want to ask how long this trip will take, but you already know the answer. As long as it takes, or until someone falls overboard. The cold gets inside you, not metaphorically, physically. It works its way in through your boots, your sleeves, your collar. It wraps itself around your spine and settles there like a sleeping animal. You start to shiver, then shake. The others ignore it. Shivering means you're still alive. For now. This is the North Sea in the Middle Ages. It does not want you here. It has no patience, no mercy, and no memory. It has drowned better men than you and forgotten them without ceremony. So hold on. Don't blink. And whatever you do, don't fall in. Because if the waves don't get you, the cold will. And if the cold spares you, the fog won't. This isn't just a body of water. It's a god with no name. And you are not welcome. You wake up wet, again, not just damp, not just sweaty, wet, like someone poured a bucket of seawater into your bed as a prank and forgot to laugh. The straw beneath you is half mulch, half compost, and all misery. It reeks of rot, mildew, and old fish. There's a faint crunch when you shift your weight, the straw cracking like the bones in your spine. Your tunic, the only one you own, is soaked through and stiff in all the wrong places. The wool hardened into cold sheets that cling to your skin like a punishment. You're not sure if it rained during the night, or if the roof simply wept on you in solidarity. There is no sunrise, just a slow gray exhale from the sky, the kind of dim light that might be called dawn if it had any warmth in it, which it doesn't. The air is a damp knife, sliding under your blanket, a matted, lice-ridden wool hide that probably died of sadness long before it ended up on your body. You try to roll over and immediately regret it. Your hip clicks, your back protests. Your feet, bare, cold, already starting to sting, make contact with the dirt floor, which is less dirt and more a thick smear of slop from last night's slush. Someone spilled pottage and the ever-present residue of being too close to livestock at all times. You sit up. Your head doesn't hurt because of sickness or drink. It hurts because you slept with your neck bent like a snapped branch. You're not hungover. You're just medieval. Your joints ache with a creaking that feels biblical. You rub your eyes and wipe away the crust of sleep and smoke that clings to them. The smell in the room is enough to make you consider unconsciousness again. Sweat, mold, animal breath, a faint suggestion of urine, and something vaguely marine, like if a seal had died under the floorboards, and everyone decided not to bring it up out of politeness. The hut is silent, but not peaceful, just tired. You share this single-room box with 6 other people, 2 chickens, and a goat, named something you've long forgotten. Nobody speaks this early, mostly because their jaws won't move properly until the frost retreats from their bones. Someone coughs, someone else groans. The goat sneezes. You shiver. Not delicately, violently. Your body rattles like loose kindling. You press your arms around your chest and try to trap whatever heat hasn't already fled to somewhere more dignified, like the bottom of the North Sea. There is no fire yet. The embers from last night's hearth are cold and sulking, buried in ash. You poke at them with a stick, not because you think it'll help, but because it's something to do while you try not to cry from how bad your feet hurt. You can't feel your toes. Not in the poetic sense. Literally. They might be there, but they're not taking messages right now. The firewood is damp. Of course it is. Everything is damp. You blow on the coals anyway, whispering a prayer to whatever smoky god lives in the chimney hole, and eventually the kindling sighs into a reluctant flame. It gives off about as much heat as a fart and smells worse. Breakfast isn't happening yet. It might not happen at all. There's a pot near the fire filled with something gray, and you don't know if that's what's left from last night's pottage or if the rats added their own recipe during the night. You don't ask. You don't care. Food is just something you endure to avoid dying. You scoop out a handful and chew without tasting it, because tasting would imply a luxury no one here deserves. Outside, the wind begins to rise again. It claws at the walls, rattling loose boards and seeping through every gap like an unwanted ghost. The thatch trembles. The door groans. Someone's breath fogs in the air like incense for a religion no one remembers. You know what comes next. Work, the boats, the sea, the same hell in a different shape. You haven't even put on your boots yet. They're still wet from yesterday. They'll be wet tomorrow. You slide them on and feel the cold embrace of leather that never dried. They squelch. Your socks are mossy with mold. Your heels already itch. And this is just how you start the day. There is no such thing as dry in this place, only less wet. The sea is always with you, in the walls, in the air, in your lungs, and now, in your bed, you live beside it. You work in it. You sleep under its breath. And one day, if you're lucky, it won't be the sea that kills you. Something else will get there first. The wind doesn't blow. It howls. It shrieks. It claws. This isn't a gentle breeze whispering through trees or the kind that flutters linen on a line. This is the North Sea wind in winter, and it doesn't ask permission. It barges into your bones like a thief and sets up shop behind your ribs. You step outside your hut, and it hits you square in the face with the force of a slap from a bitter god. The kind of slap that reminds you just how thin your skin is, how exposed your eyes are, how utterly unprotected your body has always been. Your cloak, if you can call it that, is just a rectangle of wool held together with a pin and a prayer. It's crusted with salt, stiff with damp, and offers as much warmth as a wet rag draped over a scarecrow. The wind doesn't even notice it. It slides beneath, around, and through the fabric like it's not even there. You clutch it tighter, but your fingers barely move. They're already numb. Not the slow kind of numb. The fast kind, like someone dipped them in ice and told them to forget what heat ever felt like. Your boots, soaked since yesterday, squish against your feet, the leather cold and pliable like dead flesh. Every step kicks up a spray of sea mist that immediately clings to your leggings and freezes into tiny glass shards. You can feel them forming, 100 little razors etching their way into your shins. You grit your teeth and move anyway, because standing still is worse. At least when you're walking, you can pretend you're chasing warmth, even if it's just a rumor someone once told you in a fever dream. The wind does something else out here. It finds holes in your sleeves, at your neck, between your shoulder blades. It doesn't just gust. It searches, probes, finds the weak spots in your clothing, and wriggles its way in like a worm in an apple. Suddenly your back is cold, then your chest. Then both your ears are ringing from the sting of air colder than any metal you've ever touched. Your nose drips, your eyelashes freeze together. Your face has stopped hurting, which should be good news. except it means the nerves have given up. Your hut behind you offers no relief. It might as well be made of reeds and wet paper. The walls shake in the wind. The roof whistles. Gaps in the planks are stuffed with straw, rags, and sometimes just hope. Inside, the wind still finds you. It gets in under doors, through cracks, down chimneys. It doesn't care about property lines. You sleep with your cloak on, your head wrapped in cloth, your breath steaming up into the rafters. But the wind watches. It waits. The moment you shift, it returns. You're not the only one losing to it. The chickens are half frozen and silent. The goat hasn't moved in hours. The fishing nets have turned into stiff, useless bundles of frost and twine. Even the sea looks like it's trying to retreat. Ice forms at the edges of the rocks like teeth, and every wave crashes with the violence of something in a very bad mood. The boats, those poor, miserable boats, groan on their moorings, their sails furled and flapping, ropes stiff as iron. You know the wind will snap one before week's end. It always does. There are no trees for shelter, nothing to break the gusts. Just a few low walls made of stones and desperation, half sunk into the frozen earth. The villagers walk with their heads down, shoulders hunched, mouths closed. No one speaks in wind like this. Words get stolen mid-sentence. Breath gets ripped out of lungs. You don't talk. You endure. You've tried layering. Everyone has. But when your only shirt has a hole under one arm, and your under tunic was last dry sometime in August, layering is more theory than reality. You wrap yourself in whatever's available. A fish skin apron, a threadbare scarf, a bit of sailcloth you found on the beach last spring. None of it works. The wind laughs at all of it, laughs at you. And still, somehow, this isn't the worst of it. Not yet. You know how bad it's going to get. You've seen what happens when the wind screams for 3 days straight. Doors blow off. Roofs cave in. Fires go out and don't come back. People start coughing blood. Children stop crying. And the sea? The sea starts to listen, starts to reach higher onto the shore, starts looking for someone to take. So you keep walking, keep your head down, keep your arms tight. The wind cuts through everything. Clothes, muscle, willpower. And when it's done slicing you to the bone, it keeps going. Because this isn't just weather. It's war, and the wind always wins. Weather in the North Sea isn't something you check. It's something you survive. There's no reliable forecast, no helpful chart pinned to the village wall. There's just the sky, heavy and boiling, and the gut feeling that whatever's coming is going to hurt. Every day begins with a glance upward, not in reverence, but in dread. Is that a cloud or a warning? Is that a breeze or the front line of a storm sharpening its knives? You don't get seasons here. You get cycles of punishment. The wind is constant, but the rest rotates like a cruel menu. Rain that falls sideways, sleet that clings to your skin like thorns, fog so dense it chokes your vision and your lungs at the same time. It creeps in off the water like a living thing, slow, deliberate, unbothered by your prayers. You can't see your neighbor's hut, much less your own hand. You can stand 6 feet from the sea and not know it's there until it swallows your boots. The rain is the worst kind of liar. It starts as a drizzle, something almost manageable. Then, with no warning, it turns violent. It pounds roofs until the thatch gives up and leaks in wide, miserable rivers. It drenches clothes that were already damp, soaks bedding that never gets dry, and turns dirt paths into black sludge that swallows shoes and dignity whole. You stop hoping for sunshine. You start hoping the rain lets up before it peels your skin off. You can't escape it indoors. Water runs down the walls. It drips from the rafters onto your face while you sleep. Your boots stay wet for so long they start to grow things. The smell of mildew becomes a permanent background note to your life, layered behind the fish and the smoke and the faint ammonia of communal existence. Children are born with coughs. Old men die with lungs full of water. Women wrap their infants in furs that are never quite dry, whispering lullabies over the rattle of storm wind hammering the shutters. And then there are the sudden storms. Not gradual builds, not distant rumblings that offer time to prepare. These storms erupt, sky gone black in an instant, thunder that cracks like a cannon, wind that throws carts and shutters, and sometimes people. The sea answers back, waves rising like angry gods, crashing against boats and dragging them backwards into chaos. You've seen men scream for the shore, only to vanish between one flash of lightning and the next. You've seen the beach littered with the splinters of ships and the bloated things they once carried. Sometimes, lightning strikes a hut. The thatch goes up like tinder, flames devouring everything in minutes, while the rain laughs and does nothing to stop it. Other times, the wind tears off a roof mid-supper. The family doesn't rebuild, they leave, or they die. Sometimes it's hard to tell which. There's no such thing as a nice day. A clear sky just means the fog hasn't shown up yet, or the wind is planning something worse. The sun, when it appears, does not warm you. It glares, like a suspicious stranger. You stand outside blinking, unsure how to feel, because brightness feels unnatural. You don't trust it. You shouldn't. Even sleep offers no protection. The weather gets in anyway. You wake shivering, soaked, cursing a hole in the roof you thought you patched last week. You lie there listening to the wind, testing the walls, the creak of timbers shifting, the occasional groan of something giving way. You wonder if the morning will find you beneath your roof, or if it'll be scattered across the field like broken promises. The worst part is, no one acts like it's unusual, because it isn't. This is the North Sea in the Middle Ages. The weather isn't a background element. It's a participant, an enemy, a daily assault from above and around. People don't dress for it, they endure it. You don't plan around it, you brace for it. You're not living in nature, you're surviving its tantrums. And every cloud on the horizon is another fist waiting to swing. Your boat is not a ship. It's not even really a boat, at least not by modern standards. It's a narrow, miserable thing, clinker built from overlapping planks that groan when you so much as look at them. The wood is soft in places, swollen with salt and age, and stiff in others where the tar has gone brittle and cracked like old leather. It doesn't gleam. It doesn't glide. It creaks like a dying animal and smells worse. And you're going to sea in it anyway. There's no deck to speak of, just the open hull, knee-high walls to keep the worst of the water out, and a prayer that the waves will be feeling merciful. You climb in, and your foot lands with a splash. Not water from the sea, water from the night. Rain pooled at the bottom, soaking rope, bait, and whatever dignity you were trying to hang on to. You grab a bucket not to complain, but to start bailing. Because if you don't, the boat sinks before it even leaves the shore. The tar caulking between the planks is a living thing. It moves. It peels. It flakes off in chunks when you're not looking, exposing thin seams that suck seawater in with a sound you've come to dread. A sharp hiss, followed by a cold trickle against your ankle. You plug it with a rag. You know it won't hold. You do it anyway. This boat isn't watertight. It's barely suggestion tight. You share the boat with 4 other men, maybe 5, depending on who showed up this morning and who was still alive after last week's storm. There's no captain, no chain of command, just a loose agreement that someone should steer and everyone else should row until their arms scream. You're packed in tight, thighs pressed against sodden wood, hands blistered from hauling nets, and no one smells good. Everyone stinks like old fish and wet wool and the kind of fear that lives just behind your teeth. You don't talk. Talking wastes breath. The sail is a rectangle of patched cloth that sags when the wind dies and snaps with alarming violence when it picks up. The mast is lashed in place with cord, so old it might be holding on out of spite. You've seen it give before. One moment you're sailing. The next, the mast is gone and the boat's on its side and you're in the water praying to a God who's heard it all before. You look up at the sail now and wonder if today's the day it betrays you again. You have no compass, no charts, no depth gauge. You steer by the sun when it shows, by landmarks when you can see them, and by gut when there's nothing else. Sometimes the gut is wrong. Sometimes you drift too far. Sometimes you come back to shore 3 days later, missing one man and half your haul. Or you don't come back at all. The sea doesn't return everything it borrows. There's no shelter on board, no cabin, no cover. When the rain starts, you get wet. When the wind cuts, you curl into yourself like a dying animal and hope the exposure doesn't take you before the cold does. Your cloak is sodden within minutes. Your gloves, fingerless, if you even have them, cling to your skin like cold meat. And when the boat rocks, which it always does, you brace your knees against the sides and try not to puke into your lap. Not because it's shameful, because you can't afford the lost calories. The boat is heavy in the water, too heavy. You know this, but the nets are full and the fish are your only chance at eating tomorrow. Or paying rent to a lord who won't care that the hull is leaking, only that his share isn't met. You bail again. You bail constantly. Bail with one hand while rowing with the other. Bail while eating. Bail while praying. You bail in your sleep, because even in dreams you can't forget that this boat isn't floating so much as arguing with gravity. And through all of this, you stay quiet. Because complaining doesn't patch planks. Grumbling doesn't keep the water out. You stay still. You stay braced. You stay cold and wet and scared, but you stay. Because this boat is your livelihood, your coffin, your church. And once you leave the shore, you pray it doesn't become all three. It starts before the horizon disappears, before the waves get big, before the clouds turn black. You're still within sight of the shore, and your stomach is already beginning to rebel. It doesn't matter if you've done this 100 times. It doesn't matter if you grew up on boats and brine and salted fish. The North Sea doesn't care about experience. It comes for your balance first, then your guts, then everything else. The motion is what gets you. Not violent, not yet, just wrong. An endless sway, like your organs are floating inside you, and none of them are on the same rhythm. Your head tells you one thing, your eyes another, and your inner ear. That's screaming. You try to focus on the horizon, but the fog eats it. You try to steady yourself, but the boat tilts at angles that make your knees whimper and your spine clench. Your stomach pulls tight like a fist and refuses to unclench. You vomit over the side because there's nowhere else to do it. There's no bathroom, no privacy, just you, retching into the wind while the other men pretend not to notice. They've either done it themselves or will soon. It's not shameful, it's just standard. You wipe your mouth with your sleeve, which is already soaked with sea spray and sweat, and try not to cry. Because crying takes energy, and you don't have any to spare. You try to eat something, dried fish, hard bread, but your throat closes. Your body knows better. Food is ammunition for nausea, and right now, your gut's already at war. The cramps start next. Deep, twisting spasms that feel like your intestines are trying to tie themselves into knots and strangle each other. You curl forward slightly, pressing your hands into your stomach, and breathe through your teeth. It doesn't help. Nothing does. Vertigo kicks in hard. The sea tilts one way. Your brain thinks it's the other. The result is a sense of constant, bone-deep wrongness, like the world has slipped its axis and taken your sanity with it. You close your eyes and feel the boat heave under you, an invisible hand jerking you upward and then dropping you without warning. Over and over again, your heart pounds in a rhythm that isn't yours. Your lungs forget how to breathe in time with your body. Then the hallucinations begin. You think you see shapes in the fog. Men, animals, things with too many limbs. Your peripheral vision starts inventing movement where there is none. The water ripples, and you're sure something massive is swimming just beneath the surface, watching. You hear voices, low and distant, calling your name in a language you don't speak. The waves slosh against the hull, and for a moment you're certain they're whispering secrets, dark and wet and ancient. No one warns you about this part. Everyone talks about the vomiting, the headaches, the nausea. No one tells you the sea can play with your mind like a toy. The line between dream and waking blurs until you're gripping the side of the boat and swearing you just saw your dead uncle standing on the water like a lighthouse ghost. You blink, and he's gone, but the dread stays. The worst part is, you can't leave. There is no getting off the ride. You are trapped in this wooden coffin with your pain, your confusion, and the stench of half-digested pottage mingling with the brine. The wind whips your hair into your face. The salt burns your cracked lips. And every time the boat pitches, you brace yourself for the moment it won't come back upright. And through it all, you have to work. You have to row, haul nets, tie knots with trembling fingers, and blurred vision. You can't stop just because your stomach has declared mutiny, and your brain thinks the clouds are melting. If you stop, someone else suffers, or the boat drifts, or the catch spoils, and you don't eat. Seasickness is not a phase. It's not a thing you get over. It's a tax. The North Sea demands payment in bile and terror before it lets you pass. And you pay it again and again because there is no other choice. Because on this water, survival is earned in suffering. And this is just the down payment. You can't swim. Not really. Maybe you can dog paddle for a few seconds, flail your arms in a desperate imitation of survival, but not in this water, not in this cold, not in this century. Swimming is a fantasy here. Something rich men's sons might do in warm lakes far inland, or something you try exactly once before the sea teaches you what a mistake that was. You don't swim. You drown more slowly. There are no lifeboats, no spare skiffs tied to the side, no emergency dinghies waiting to be deployed. The boat is the lifeboat, and even that's being generous. There are no life jackets either, no inflated vests or helpful flotation devices, no rings to throw, no ropes that actually reach. There's just a plank of wood that may or may not still float when it hits the water, and if you're lucky enough to grab onto it, congratulations. Now you're dying slightly less quickly. If you fall in, you're gone. Not eventually. Immediately. You've got maybe 30 seconds of coherent thought before the cold sinks its claws into your spine and starts pulling. A minute before your hands forget how to move. 2, maybe 3, before your muscles lock up entirely and your body goes still, not from calm, but from betrayal. The human body isn't built for this. Not the temperature, not the salt, not the panic. You breathe once, sharp and involuntary, and the sea rushes in to fill your lungs like it's been waiting. There are no rescues. Not because your crewmates don't care, though some of them might not, but because they can't. Turning the boat around means losing control of it. Slowing down risks capsizing. Leaning over to pull you in might send someone else over with you. They weigh the odds, and more often than not, the math is cruel. a boat with 4 men has a chance. A boat with 3 men and a half dead one flopping in the surf? That's just 4 bodies instead of 1. They might call out to you. They might shout your name, or curse, or cross themselves. But they don't jump in. No one jumps in. You fall, and then you're alone. Adrift in water that feels more like stone, gasping under a sky that doesn't look down. You claw at the surface, spit out salt, try to scream. But the waves slap your mouth shut, and the cold presses in tighter, wrapping itself around your chest like iron bands. Your clothes drag you down. Wool, soaked and heavy, turns to anchors around your arms and legs. Boots fill instantly, doubling your weight. Your limbs stop obeying you. Your eyes sting. You flail, then twitch, then float. The sea rocks you like a mother cradling a child she never planned to return. They don't stop the boat. They can't. They watch you vanish and turn their eyes forward again, because they know this isn't the first time. It won't be the last. The sea takes men the way fire takes wood. Quickly, completely, without apology. Sometimes you're close enough to the boat that you almost make it back. That's the worst. You can see the hull, hear the creak of the oarlocks, smell the fish rotting in the bottom. You stretch out your hand, but the current pulls harder. Your fingers brush the side, and then you're under again, dragged back into the dark by something older and colder than understanding. And if they do try, if someone reaches out with a pole, throws a rope, yells for you to swim, you still probably die. Because by then, your blood has turned sluggish, your mind is fogged, and your grip is too weak to hold anything. Rescue, even if attempted, is a race that ends before the first step. No one marks the spot where you went in. No buoy, no marker, no coordinates scribbled in a log. You're just gone, swallowed, absorbed. And tomorrow, when the boat returns without you, someone might mutter your name. Someone might shrug. Someone might go through your things. And then they'll push off again, into the same water, with the same risks. The sea doesn't remember who it takes, but everyone else does. The water does not welcome you. It does not forgive you. It does not forget. It isn't just something you cross or sail upon. It's a thing you battle, every hour, with every muscle, every prayer, and every shivering breath. You can't reason with it. You can't read it. And you can't touch it without it biting back. Because the North Sea doesn't care that you're cold, or tired, or hungry. It cares that you're here, and it hates that. This isn't tropical turquoise, sun-drenched and gentle. It's gray and heavy, thick with salt and silt, with a taste that burns the back of your throat and leaves your tongue numb. It stings your eyes. It rots your boots. It eats the skin from your hands one layer at a time. When it splashes over the side of the boat, it brings with it the sharp sting of freezing salt and something else, something foul. Bits of weed tangled with fish guts, feathers, bones. Things you don't try to identify. You bail it out, again and again, knowing full well it will return before you can even sit down. There are no clean waves, no tidy, rolling swells. The North Sea is a slop of overlapping tempers, wind from one direction, current from another, and your little boat caught in the middle, always tilted, always off balance, always one poor step from flipping. You don't walk in this boat. You shuffle, you brace, you crouch and grip and hope. Because one wrong move, one unexpected lurch, and you're overboard. And the moment your body meets that water, it's no longer your body. You feel the hate instantly. The cold isn't just cold. It's a total, soul-deep invasion. It moves faster than thought, racing up your limbs and squeezing your lungs, dragging every ounce of warmth out of your blood and replacing it with panic. Your fingers go stiff, your breath stutters, your muscles seize. The sea doesn't even need to drown you. It can just hold you for a few seconds and let the cold do the rest. And it isn't clean. You've seen what floats in it. The half-sunk carcasses of fishing birds, their wings spread wide like broken promises. The oily shimmer of some unknown filth that coats your nets and your skin. Bloated fish with milky eyes that stare up from the waves like they know exactly what you're doing out here. And sometimes worse, shapes that don't belong to animals. Limbs twisted in the wrong direction, hair tangled in seaweed. A face, or something close to one, half gone, swollen and silent. You don't talk about it. You just nudge it away with your oar and hope it doesn't get caught. The salt rubs you raw. Every splash, every misty spray, leaves a residue that dries into crystals on your skin and stings in every crack and cut. Your hands, always wet, become pale and blistered. The skin peels away in ragged strips. Your lips split. Your eyes burn. You spit constantly, trying to get the taste out of your mouth, but it lingers. Even in sleep, when your dreams aren't full of waves, your tongue is dry and briny. The sea follows you even when you leave it. You learn to fear the sound of water, the slap against the hull that's too loud, the gurgle near your feet that wasn't there a moment ago, the sickening creak of boards taking on more than they should. It's always trying to get in, always testing, always waiting for a weak seam, a loose nail, a moment of distraction. And if you let your guard down, if you look the wrong way, or laugh too hard, or lean too far, it takes you. You never feel safe. Not even on calm days, if those can be said to exist. The calm feels fake. It feels like a setup, a trick. Because you know the sea is just catching its breath, waiting to throw the next wave, the next storm, the next sudden invisible shift that sends your boat tilting at an angle your stomach can't follow. The water doesn't just want to drown you. It wants to undo you, strip you, take you apart until there's nothing left but salt and silence, and all you can do is stay above it. For now, the cold here isn't poetic. It doesn't creep in slowly like a villain in a story. It doesn't offer warnings or give you time to brace. The North Sea doesn't ease into anything. It takes, all at once, and without grace. One moment, you're cold and cursing it. The next, your body is a failing furnace, and everything you are begins shutting down, layer by layer, like a house going dark during a storm. Hypothermia here is not some distant medical term. It's a ritual, and you are always the offering. It doesn't matter how many times you've been out here. Experience doesn't make you warmer. Your cloak is soaked through before the boat even leaves the shoreline. Your boots squish when you move. Your mittens, stitched 3 years ago from old wool and scraps of linen, are more holes than fabric now. You've patched them so many times they barely remember their original shape. Your fingers are numb before sunrise. Not tingly, not stiff, just gone. They move when you tell them to, but it feels like you're commanding someone else's hands from across the room. You try to warm them under your arms, or blow hot breath between your cupped palms, but the wind snatches that warmth before it gets anywhere useful. You tuck your hands back into your sleeves, pull your cloak tighter, and grit your teeth, not out of defiance, just to keep them from chattering. Your jaw has been trembling for an hour, and your tongue feels thick. Your nose drips constantly. You stopped wiping it an hour ago. The snot just freezes to your lip, stiff as a wire, and stays there. Your breath comes out in sharp white clouds that vanish instantly. It's a lie, that breath. It looks warm, but it isn't. It's just proof that your lungs are still trying. You're shivering violently now, shoulders jerking, legs twitching. You don't remember when it started. It doesn't feel like something you're doing. It feels like something being done to you. Each tremor drains your energy, yet you get no heat in return. You are burning fuel with no fire. Just smoke, just noise. And then, worse than the shaking, it stops. The shivering fades. You think it's a good sign, like maybe you've adjusted, but it's not. It's the worst sign, because it means your body has decided you're not worth the effort anymore. That trying to keep you alive is no longer a good investment. Your limbs start to feel strangely warm. Your skin prickles like it's sunburned. You think about taking off your cloak, just for a moment, to breathe. But you don't, because somewhere, deep in the sluggish, frozen core of your brain, a voice is still whispering, "Don't move. Don't believe the heat. It's not real." Your thoughts slow. You forget why you stood up. You stare at the rope in your hands and can't remember what you're supposed to do with it. You blink, and suddenly everyone else is shouting. You miss something. A wave hits. You stumble. You sit down hard, harder than you meant to, and just stay there. Someone slaps you, not cruelly, just enough to bring you back. You nod, pretending to understand. Your lips don't move the way you want them to. Your words come out slurred. You think you're saying, "I'm fine," but no one looks convinced. Your vision narrows. Not like sleep, like the world is slowly closing in around you. A tunnel, dark and quiet. You don't feel cold anymore. That's the final trick. The cold vanishes, and you think, briefly, tragically, that maybe you'll be all right. You feel calm. You feel nothing. You feel done. That's when they drag you to the middle of the boat, wrap you in every dry scrap they can find, and press bodies against yours. Someone rubs your limbs. Someone else shouts in your ear. You drift in and out, a flickering candle in the wind. If you're lucky, it works. If not, they'll keep your coat and oars and toss the rest of you overboard before nightfall. Because out here, the cold doesn't negotiate. It kills when it wants, and the only thing slower than your body shutting down is the realization that no one's coming to save you. It doesn't start with a scream. It starts with a sound. A crack, a groan, a shift in the hull that tells you something's wrong long before you can name it. Then comes the cold rush of water against your ankles. Not in a wave, not dramatic, just sudden and quiet, like a hand sliding up your leg in the dark. By the time someone shouts, it's too late. The boat is already listing. The oars have gone silent. Everyone is listening now. Not for help, for the shape of what's coming. There is no storm, no towering wave, just fog and night, and the slow realization that you are sinking. It happens like a breath being held too long. You feel it in the boat first, her old bones creaking, wood warping, joints loosening under pressure. She sighs. You'd swear she sighs. And then she begins to lower herself into the sea like she's tired of fighting. The water doesn't crash over you. It creeps, fills from below, soaks the nets, drowns the bait, turns every step into a suctioning pull toward the bottom. There's no flare to send up, no horn, no signal. No one even knows you're out here. The fog swallowed your departure hours ago. The sky is thick and low, like wet wool draped over the stars, and the coastline you left behind might as well be another world. You shout once, just to do something, but the sound dies immediately. The air is too damp to carry it. Your voice feels small. Your lungs feel smaller. Men move fast, but not well. There's no protocol, no rescue drill, just fear in their eyes and hands, slapping the sides of the boat, reaching for tools that won't help. Someone bails, someone prays, someone else just stares at the water like it's already inside him. No one jumps. That would be suicide. Then the boat tilts harder. A jolt to the left, sudden and sharp, and now your knees are underwater. The freezing grip of the sea climbs higher. You try to stand, but there's nothing solid left to brace against. You fumble for the edge, slick and shrinking. Your hand finds a rope, but it slips through your fingers like it wants to leave you behind. The boat groans again, louder this time, a sound like bones breaking. Then it happens. The final lurch. The sea comes in all at once, like a creature pulling you down by the throat. You're submerged before your brain catches up. Cold slams into your chest like a hammer. Your breath vanishes. Your ears fill. You kick, but you don't know which way is up. Everything is black and thick and churning. Your arms flail in slow motion. Your cloak wraps around your legs like a noose. You try to scream, but the sea rushes in to meet it. It is quiet down here. Not peaceful. Just empty. There is no light. No sound except the thump of your heart slowing in your ears. You open your eyes, but the darkness is complete. Your body is no longer yours. Your limbs are soft, drifting. Your chest aches and pulses. You feel your thoughts begin to scatter, pulled apart like thread unraveling in water. You want to reach for something. Anything. But even that thought is heavy. Even that is too much. And then, nothing. No struggle. No final gasp. No dramatic death. Just silence. The sea is very good at keeping secrets. It doesn't mark the place where you disappeared. It doesn't remember your name. Your body may never float back. If it does, it won't look like you anymore. The boat is gone. The men are gone. The story is gone before it was ever told. And the sea rolls on, patient and gray, as if you were never there at all. The village smells like something dying in slow motion. Not the sharp stench of fresh decay, but the lingering, embedded rot that comes from centuries of salt, damp, and neglect. The air itself is thick with it. Every breath tastes faintly of fish and mold and the kind of mustiness that doesn't fade, no matter how many fires you burn or herbs you hang above the door. The salt creeps in from the sea, invisible but relentless, riding every gust of wind, soaking into your walls, your clothes, your skin. The houses here aren't built. They're patched, stitched together from driftwood, stone, and whatever wreckage washes ashore. The salt water eats them all the same. Iron nails rust within weeks. Wooden beams grow soft at their cores. Your roof, thatch, if you're lucky. Rotted cloth and turf, if you're not, sags inward like it's too tired to stay upright. When it rains, the water comes through in lines and drips, tracing familiar paths down the walls and into the floor, which squelches even when dry. Salt doesn't just attack the structures. It ruins the land beneath them. The soil turns slick and gray, the grass dies, and what's left is a sludge that sucks at your boots and clings to your heels like a curse. Paths become trenches. The village square, such as it is more pit than plaza, ringed with puddles that never fully evaporate and streaked with trails of dead seaweed tracked in by tired feet. No one bothers trying to clean it. There's no point. The sea always wins. Your walls sweat. Even when there's no fog, even on the rare mornings when the sky shows blue, the inside of your hut remains damp. You touch the beams, and your fingers come away wet. You sit on your stool and feel the chill rise through the legs. Everything you own smells like the shore. Rope, rot, salt, smoke. Your bedding is never dry. Your cloak grows mildew in the corners, and your hands, always wet, are rough and cracked, stinging where the salt finds the open skin. Metal doesn't survive. Knives rust in their sheaths. Buckles crumble. Tools flake apart at the edges until the blade you've sharpened every week simply snaps one day with no warning. You hammer with wooden pegs and bind things with tarred string, knowing neither will last the season. Doors sag on their hinges. Pots crack in the cold. Nails weep rust onto the floors. You find little red trails like dried blood and just wipe them away, knowing more will come. The smell never leaves. You could follow it in the dark. Fish, salt, ash, human sweat, and the low, sour undertone of mold. It clings to your hair, your clothes, your breath. You wake up coughing, throat raw from the damp, and spend the first hour of every morning trying to clear your chest. Everyone does. Children wheeze in their sleep. Elders rattle like loose carts until they don't wake at all. You don't name it. It's not a sickness, it's just the air. Even the animals suffer. The chickens huddle in corners, their feathers matted and dull. The goats chew with slow, tired mouths, their hooves blackened by the mud. You've stopped bothering with pigs. They get sick too fast, their skin cracking open in sores that never close. And the dogs. Thin, salt-crusted, always whining, scurry from door to door, hoping for a scrap that doesn't taste like brine. The worst part is that no one sees it anymore. The rot, the corrosion, the constant wet. It's just life, just the village, just how things are. You pass the same crumbling wall 100 times and never notice it sagging further. You step over the same broken plank without thinking. Your neighbor's house leans harder to one side each week, but no one says anything because yours does too. There is no repair, only delay, only make do, only endure. And outside, just past the last ruined fence and the tide-blackened stones, the sea waits, not surging, not shouting, just waiting, calm and patient, because it knows what you won't say out loud. The rot never stops, and it never goes back. The stew looks fine. That's the trick. A few scraps of white fish, a broth made from yesterday's bones, a handful of limp herbs to hide the smell. You lift the lid, and the steam rises thick and briny, curling in the air like it's trying to climb away. Everyone gathers close, not because it smells good, because it's food. And food means maybe your hands stop shaking for a while. Maybe the ache in your belly quiets just enough to sleep through the wind. You dip the ladle in and stir slowly. The fish flakes apart too easily. The broth is cloudy, tinged slightly green. A slick of oil, thick and too bright, clings to the surface, refusing to mix. You say nothing. You've seen worse. You pour out 5 bowls, one for each of you. There is no 6th. You don't speak his name. The sea took him yesterday. No one waits. They slurp fast, eyes on the floor. The muscles are chewy. Too chewy. You know what that means. Too long on the beach, or too long in the pot, maybe both. You chew anyway. You have no other option. Someone coughs. Someone else spits a bit of shell into their hand and hides it in their cloak. There's grit in your teeth. Sand, probably. But it might be something else. You stop thinking about it. The North Sea provides. That's what they say. What they mean is, the North Sea gives you exactly what it wants to, when it feels like it, and usually with strings attached. The fish are smaller this year. The water's been warmer. The shoreline has bloated with jellyfish and algae that burns your skin. The old man down the lane swears he saw a whale carcass last week, floating sideways, split open, spilling its guts into the same bay your nets drag through every morning. You eat the fish anyway, because the salt hides the rot, and you've trained your gut to tolerate things that should kill it. Sometimes you're lucky. A haul of cod, still twitching, with clear eyes and tight scales. You boil them, salt them, smoke what you can. Other times it's just bones and slime, or eels with strange bumps, or shellfish that smell like something from a grave. You don't always know what's safe. You go by instinct, by superstition, by silence. If a thing makes you sick, but not too sick, you make a note. If it kills you, someone else makes a note. Usually, the seaweed's worse. You gather it when there's nothing else. Dry it on the rocks. Grind it into pottage. Stretch it with oats or barley if you've got any left. But sometimes it's black, where it should be green. Sometimes it foams. Sometimes it smells like rust. You still eat it, even when the children complain their bellies hurt. Even when the old woman vomits into the hearth and falls asleep with her face pale and slick. What else are you going to do? The earth here grows rocks. The sea at least grows things. You've seen the results. The wasting, the rashes, the fevers that start with a stomachache and end in silence. You've buried people whose last meal came from the same pot you scraped clean. You never know what bite will be the one. You just chew and swallow, and hope that whatever parasite is burrowing into your gut today is the kind your body can wrestle into submission. And it's not just the food, it's the water you cook it in. Pulled straight from the shoreline, filtered through a cloth that's more whole than fabric, boiled if you have the fuel. You tell yourself that's enough. You lie to yourself that the heat kills whatever was in it. You know better. But knowing doesn't help when you're hungry. There's a reason no one here eats slowly. No one savors. Food is medicine, punishment, and gamble all at once. You eat to keep breathing. And sometimes, even that doesn't work. Because the North Sea gives, yes, but only what it doesn't need. Only what it couldn't use. Only what it wants you to have. And some days, it wants you to eat your own end. You don't remember the last time your skin felt dry. Not clean, just dry. The damp has soaked into you, into every pore, every fold, every corner of your body you used to ignore. Your feet haven't been truly warm in months. Your back aches in places you didn't know could ache. And your skin? It's beginning to give up. Not peel, not itch, just let go. It starts behind your knees, where the wool rubs against your damp skin day after day. A rash, a rawness, a faint sting that turns into a steady throb. Then it spreads. Your thighs, your elbows, your hands. Especially your hands. Red, cracked, soft as pulp. You touch something sharp, and it doesn't cut you. It enters. You pull away and find dirt in the wound before you even noticed it opened. And when the sea spray hits it, you hiss like meat dropped in a fire. You try not to look at your feet anymore. They've gone beyond help. The skin is gray in patches, white in others. The nails are thick and curling. Sometimes you soak them in salt water because it's all you have, and sometimes the salt water makes it worse. The pain is constant, but you walk anyway because no one here stops walking. Not until they collapse. Not until they're carried. Your lungs are no better. The cough started weeks ago. Everyone coughs. It's as common as breathing. But your cough has changed. It scrapes now. You feel it deep in your chest, like something's growing there. Moss, maybe, or rot. When you cough in the mornings, it comes up black, sometimes red, sometimes just foam. You spit it into the hearth and move on. There's nothing else to do. If you're lucky, you'll get used to it. And then there's the salt boils. Small at first. Little red dots on your thighs, your armpits, your scalp. You thought they were insect bites until they burst. The pus runs yellow, thick, and warm. You press on one, and it weeps for an hour. You wrap it with cloth, but the cloth is never clean. Nothing here is clean, and the boil returns anyway. Bigger, angrier. They form in clusters, sometimes. You smell them before you feel them. And by then it's too late. The healer's hut smells worse than the docks. A mix of old herbs, rotting bodies, and something else, something sick. You go only when you must, when your fever won't break, when your vision starts swimming, when you wake up and the world tilts sideways. You lie there on a straw pallet, soaked with other people's sweat, and the healer dabs your forehead with vinegar and mutters to the saints. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you just get up again with one more disease to carry. Worms are common. In the gut, in the skin, you feel them sometimes. Shifting, squirming. You stop being disgusted. It's just another part of you, another burden to carry. The worst are the children. Their bellies swell with parasites and hunger both. They scratch at their ears, their eyes, their feet, and cry in the night without knowing why. And there's nothing to give them. No medicine, no relief, just quiet words and a mother's cold hand on their forehead. You try to stay dry, but the sea laughs at you. It finds its way in every time, through your boots, your roof, your breath. You sleep in wet clothes and wake in wetter ones. Your skin never stops softening. Your wounds never stop weeping. You begin to forget what health feels like. Not just the absence of pain, but the absence of fear. You are always afraid now. Afraid of the next cough, the next boil, the next limp that doesn't go away. And then, one day, you just don't get up. Your body says no. Your breath stays shallow. Your limbs stay still. Someone else lights the fire. Someone else feeds the goat. You lie there and listen to the sea. It sounds closer now, as if it's waiting. Because it is. Your hands are already bleeding before the sun clears the fog. Not fresh cuts, but splits. Old wounds, reopening with each tug on the net, each cold slap of rope, each time your fingers twist the wrong way around a knot that was never going to hold. You try wrapping them in cloth, but the cloth stays wet, and wet becomes rot. Eventually, you stop trying. Blood is just part of the process now. It runs down your wrists, mixes with the salt, disappears into the bottom of the boat, like it belongs there. The nets are heavy, always heavier than they should be. Not just fish, but stones, bones, seaweed, barnacled wood, the rusted teeth of other ships long sunk. You heave with your back, not your arms, because you've learned the hard way that torn shoulders don't heal right out here. The sea doesn't give you time. And still, even using everything you've got, the net fights you. It drags. It bites. It catches on the edge of the boat and yanks you forward, so suddenly your chin slams into the wood. You see stars. You taste blood. You don't stop working. Hooks lie in wait like coiled snakes. One careless reach, and they're in your palm, your knuckle, your thigh. Not just a prick, a puncture, deep enough to feel like the hooks touching your bones. You yank it out with your teeth because no one's going to do it for you, and you haven't got time to be delicate. You wrap it with a strip of shirt and keep moving. The fish are coming up fast now. Silver bodies writhing in the nets, their own mouths bristling with barbs and spines, lashing in death panic. They don't want to die. You don't want to die. That makes two of you, and the boat's only big enough for one winner. You kill them fast when you can. You slam them on the bench or against the hull, but some still move. You've seen men get finned in the eye. You've seen an eel wrap itself around a wrist like a rope and refuse to let go. The ocean fights even in retreat. You never get used to it. You just learn not to flinch. The deck is slick with blood, fish slime, rain, seawater, everything dangerous. Every step is a risk. Your boots slide, your ankle rolls. You reach out to steady yourself and grab a blade instead of a rail. Or worse, nothing at all. One slip and you're overboard. And if you go over, they might not see, they might not hear. Or they might hear and not be able to help. You'll scream anyway. You always scream. And then the water shuts your mouth. Sometimes it isn't you. Sometimes it's the man beside you. He reaches for the line and it whips taut with sudden force, breaking 3 fingers in an instant. You hear the crack over the roar of the sea. He crumples and you step over him. Not from cruelty, but from necessity. The net's still coming. The catch is still live. And the sea doesn't stop just because one of you is down. You haul in the final section of net with your hands shaking. Not from cold, from exertion. Your arms feel hollow. Your shoulders feel bruised inside the socket. You know you've strained something. You know it'll hurt more tomorrow. But you've got a boat full of fish, and that means something. That means your family eats. That means the Lord gets his cut, and you don't get whipped for failing your tithe. That means you made it, for now. You don't celebrate. You don't rest. You just sit there for a moment and listen to the creak of the hull, the slap of water against the side, the quiet rasp of your own breath. Your hands are trembling in your lap. You wipe the blood on your cloak and examine the new cuts, already crusting over, already blending in with the old. Tomorrow, the wounds will open again, and you'll bleed into the boat again. Because this isn't labor. This isn't a job. It's a fight. And you don't win. You just outlast. You're always hungry. Not the kind of hunger that makes your stomach rumble politely. This is deeper, colder. A hunger that sits in your bones and whispers, always. It blurs your vision when you stand too fast. It wakes you in the night. It makes your fingers shake when you try to tie your boots in the morning. There is never quite enough. Not enough bread. Not enough fish. Not enough time between meals to remember what full even feels like. The catch was light this week. Again, a few cod, some herring, a handful of scrawny flatfish that smelled wrong even as they thrashed in the nets. You know better than to keep them, but you keep them anyway, because if you don't, there's nothing to take to the reeve. And if the Lord doesn't get his share, there's punishment. You can't afford another fine. You can't afford a beating. So you gut the bad ones and pray the rot doesn't spread fast enough to matter. Most of it is gone before you make it home. Half to the tithe, a third to trade for oil, twine, wood. A few pieces to pay off your brother's debt because he coughed blood for 2 days and hasn't stood up since. You barter the rest for barley and onions, which is to say, for a few meals that will disappear before the next boat even leaves the shore. What's left? Your share is barely enough to call a meal. Salted fish, so dry it cracks in your hands. You soak it for hours, boil it until the pot turns gray, then chew each piece until your jaw aches. It still tastes like rope. Your teeth hate it. One of your molars split last winter and never healed. Now, you chew on one side, and when that gets too sore, you just swallow and hope your stomach is in the mood to cooperate. And even then, the food betrays you. Salt makes you thirsty, and the only water nearby tastes faintly of metal and earth. You drink it anyway. You have to. Your stomach grumbles like an animal caged too long, then quiets. Not because it's satisfied, because it's resigned. Hunger stops feeling sharp after a while. It goes dull. A cold knot under your ribs that makes everything else feel farther away. The smell of food starts to irritate you more than excite you. You don't dream of feasts anymore. Just bread. Just something soft. You try to fill yourself with what you have. Thin pottage, made from barley husks, nettles, and whatever scraps of bone you haven't already boiled twice. You chew slowly, methodically, like you're trying to convince your body this matters. You tell yourself the nutrients are still in there, that the warmth counts, but you know it's not enough. Your belt cinches tighter each week, your cloak hangs looser, your hands look like a stranger's, knobby and dry, the knuckles too prominent. The worst part is the guilt, because you're not the hungriest. Your neighbor hasn't had meat in a month. The widow 2 doors down lost both her sons and now eats fish guts when she can get them. The children beg for scraps like dogs. And you share when you can, but there's never enough. And when you do give something away, part of you resents it, not because you're cruel, because you're afraid, because you don't know if you'll still be standing 3 days from now. So you chew your dried fish in silence and keep your eyes down when someone asks how your catch was. You say decent, even when it wasn't. You say, we'll manage, even when you won't. Because hunger isn't just a weakness here, it's a threat. To talk about it too much is to admit it's winning. You don't remember the taste of fat, or meat that wasn't salted to the edge of inedible. You don't remember what it feels like to sit back after a meal and sigh with relief. Food is function now, a transaction, a bargaining chip with death. And you are always on the verge of losing that deal. Salt is everything. More than a flavor, more than a preservative. It's time itself, measured in how long your fish will last, how far it can travel, how much silver it will bring before it stinks of death. Salt lets you survive the days when the boats stay ashore, when the wind howls too loud, when the sea refuses to give. Without it, your fish is just decay waiting to happen. Without it, you might as well be throwing your work overboard the moment you gut it. You keep your salt in a bag wrapped in leather, tucked beneath your cot where the damp can't reach it. It's not much, a fist-sized bundle, gray, crusted, uneven. You break it off in chunks with a hammer because the lumps are too solid to crumble. When the bag gets lighter, you feel it in your chest. When it's almost empty, you stop sleeping well. You know how fast the rest will go. You know what happens next. You don't buy salt. You earn it, or beg for it, or trade what little you have. A third of last week's catch bought half a handful. You stood in the market and argued for 20 minutes over a single clump, watching the merchant roll it between his fingers like it was a pearl. He knew you were desperate. Everyone does. The price climbs when the weather's bad, when the sun doesn't show, when the roads flood and the carts can't get through. Salt knows its value, and it never sells itself cheap. You tried to stretch it, rubbed it thin across the fillets, pressed harder with your thumbs, used less on the belly, skipped the tail, but the smell came faster this time. A sour edge, a hint of slime. You wrapped the worst of it in extra cloth and said nothing. Still traded it. Still watched it leave in someone else's basket and hoped they wouldn't come back angry. You tell yourself it's not spoiled, just strong, just cured with carelessness, not rot. But your nose knows better. You've smelled true rot, the kind that curls out from under the lid and sticks to your clothes, the kind that calls in the flies before the sun's even up. When fish turns, it turns hard and fast, and there's no pretending, no disguising it. Once the stench starts, it spreads, it clings. It marks everything it touches as failure. Your neighbors smell it too. They say nothing, but they don't trade as easily now. They glance at your buckets and hesitate. They pass over your stall with a nod that feels more like pity than politeness. You start offering more for less. they still hesitate. No salt means no storage, no trade, no value. You can't dry every catch, not in this weather. The fog never lifts. The wind is too wet. Your racks collapse under the weight of mold. You've tried burying fish in ashes. You've tried smoke, but nothing works like salt. Nothing else lets you make the sea last long enough to matter. The taxman doesn't care about your salt supply. He wants weight, not freshness. He'll take spoiled fish if that's all you have. He'll hold it at arm's length, wrinkle his nose, and dock your payment anyway. And if you offer less than what's owed, he won't care that it's because you couldn't afford the salt. You're still short, which means you're still in debt. Which means next time, the punishment will be worse. You consider stealing it, just once, just enough to save this week's catch. You think about the salt house, the barrels stacked behind the merchant's hut. You think about the night and how quiet the road gets after sundown, but you also think about what they did to the boy who tried last winter. They found his hand nailed to the door frame, just the hand. So instead you ration. You go without. You give up your share to save the best pieces. You hope the fish lasts one more day on air and prayer. You eat the scraps yourself. The heads, the backbones, the filmy, soft-skinned rejects that should have gone to the dogs. You chew fast and swallow before the taste sets in. Salt is gold. And gold, here, is the difference between survival and spoil. And you're running out of both. You see them before you dock, standing on the black rocks like shadows that forgot how to leave. No colors, no smiles, just the outline of weapons and authority, or at least the claim of it. One carries a ledger, tucked under his arm like a priest's book. The others don't bother pretending. They've got clubs, knives, and hands that look like they've never let go of anything gently. You pull the oars harder, hoping the tide buys you a few extra seconds. It doesn't. You survive the sea. Barely. Your hands are split and raw, your catch is thin, and your boat is leaking just enough to keep you nervous. You haven't slept more than a handful of hours in 2 days. You reek of fish and fear and salt. But the sea wasn't the hard part. This is. They don't ask how your trip was. They don't ask if anyone died, or if the catch was good. They already know it wasn't. You show them the baskets anyway, each lined with damp cloth and hope. You try not to flinch when the man with the ledger makes a sound, low and disapproving, like he's disappointed in you for not pulling gold from an ocean that barely gave you bones. He doesn't write down your name, he writes down numbers. Tonnage, estimated value, wastage deductions. You've seen the columns before. You know how fast they turn honest work into debt. And you know that even if you brought in 3 times as much, they'd find a reason to take most of it. Spoiled, undersized, improperly salted, not good enough, not theirs. The others don't need the book. They just want what's left. Maybe it's part of the tax, maybe not. They don't explain. One reaches into your boat and pulls out a whole cod without asking. The flesh tears a little from the pressure of his grip, but he doesn't care. Another takes the salt pouch you'd hidden under the bench. You say nothing. You don't even twitch. Because if you speak, they might hit you. If you reach, they will. You've seen it happen. A man shouted last season. Just shouted. And they broke his ribs so cleanly, you could hear the snap from across the dock. They dragged him out of the boat and left him in the mud, while his son tried to trade fish that was already slipping into rot. There was no punishment, no recourse, just silence. Because these men are collectors, and collectors aren't questioned. Except they're not just taxmen. You know that too. The knives they wear aren't for gutting fish. The tattoos on their arms didn't come from the monastery. You saw one of them last spring on a different coast, shouting orders from the deck of a fast ship with a black sail. He wore the same boots, the same smirk, the same habit of watching people like prey that hadn't quite been caught yet. Sometimes they come in the night, not to collect but to take. They don't wear the ledger then, just masks. They break doors. They drag out barrels. They laugh. You know they're the same men. You recognize the voice, the gait, the stink of power without fear. And when you see them again the next morning, standing by the dock in plain sight, it's like the night never happened. Because no one dares say it did. You hand over the last of your decent catch and keep the smallest fish for yourself. Maybe they didn't notice. Maybe they let you keep it because they're full. Maybe it was a mistake. Doesn't matter. You hide it under the plank and nod like you're grateful for their generosity. They wave you off with bored eyes. Your name never passes their lips. You pull away from the dock and don't breathe again until they're out of sight. The weight in your chest doesn't lift. It just settles. The fish in your boat won't feed your family. The salt is gone. The math didn't work before, and now it's worse. But you're alive. For now. The sea tried to kill you. But at least the sea didn't smile while it did it. The stories are older than the village, older than the crumbling church, older than the sagging stones that mark the edge of the burial field. They whisper of longboats that came out of the mist like teeth, and of men with axes who left nothing behind but fire and bone. You weren't there, but your grandmother was, or her grandmother, or someone whose name has vanished like the rest. It doesn't matter. The fear remains. You hear it in the way people speak when the fog gets too thick. Low voices, fewer words, glances toward the sea, as if waiting for something to materialize. You see it in the way they bless the boats before each launch, not just with prayers to God, but with old gestures you were never taught to question. Thumb to wrist, stone to lip, eyes to the horizon. Nothing written, just remembered. The wind sometimes carries voices. You tell yourself it's gulls, or the creak of old wood, or the sea grinding its bones on the rocks. But once, last winter, you heard a horn. Clear, cold, long. It cut through the night like a blade, and every dog in the village went silent. The next morning no one spoke of it. Even the elder with one ear and no fear looked paler than usual. You didn't ask. You just worked faster. But the ghosts don't always stay in stories. Last spring a boat came down from the north. Not a trading vessel. Not one of yours. Black-sailed and low-slung, with a hull built for speed. It docked without sound. By the time the guards were notified, half the fish stock was gone, the salt stores emptied, and 2 of the boys had vanished. No blood, no screams, just missing. Some said pirates. Others said Norsemen, back from the dead. You said nothing. You kept your door barred tighter after that. And then there are the ones who come in daylight. Not raiders exactly, cousins, distant kin, men from across the water, with similar eyes, similar names, but nothing soft in them. They come with gifts, sometimes. Cheese, tools, coins stamped with strange kings, and they smile too easily. You host them because you must. You feed them what you can spare, but their presence is heavy, like a storm held just offshore. They watch your daughter too long. They speak your language with a twist in it, and when they leave, the fire always burns a little lower. One of them said, your great-uncle had taken something that wasn't his. Land, debt, honor. You didn't know what he meant. You only knew he said it with a hand on his knife and a voice that invited disagreement. You didn't argue. A week later, your neighbor's ox was found dead, throat cut, no tracks in the mud. No one knocked on any doors, but everyone understood. The past doesn't die here, it just waits. In the caves near the northern cliffs, there are carvings, not Latin, not Christian. Marks of dragons and ravens and long-dead gods. You've seen them once, on a dare. Cold stone slick with moss, the smell of salt and age choking your lungs. You left a fish at the mouth, like the old stories said, just in case, because sometimes the sea takes more than fish. And you've learned not to provoke things that might still remember your name. Even the church doesn't challenge it. The priest preaches about saints and salvation, but his eyes twitch toward the coast when the wind rises. He knows. His candles burn low during storms. His prayers sound more desperate in the fog. So you fish by day and lock your doors by night. You speak the old names only in silence. You bury your dead with coins on their eyes and salt in their mouths, not because you believe it helps, but because not doing it feels like inviting something back, something with oars, something with memory, something that once took this coast in fire and steel, and could do it again without warning. Because out here, the dead don't rest. They wait for the tide. You learn not to count children too carefully, not out loud, not in front of others. You stop listing them when you pray. You stop measuring how many bowls are needed at mealtime, because some mornings it changes. One day, they're there beside you, small hands tying knots with oversized fingers, faces smeared with fish scales, grinning like the sea hasn't earned their fear yet. The next day, they're gone. Because the sea takes children the same way it takes everything else here. Without drama, without mercy, without explanation. They work early. As soon as they can lift a bucket or untangle a line, they're on the boats. No one waits for a birthday. Childhood is a luxury you don't have. You're born, you learn to stand, and then you start hauling. If not out on the water, then on the docks, gathering driftwood, sorting the catch, chasing gulls away from the drying racks with stones and screams. Their laughter is sharp and fleeting, usually carried away by the wind before it reaches you. But sometimes you hear it, and it feels like hope, until it doesn't. You heard the splash before the silence. Just one splash, too large to be a gull diving, too small to be a boat landing. You looked over and saw the cap, drifted to the surface, bobbing gently, absurdly, as if mocking how fast everything else had vanished. He was 6 or 5, you're not sure anymore. They said he'd slipped while reaching for a rope, that he didn't cry out, that he sank like a stone and never came back up. That's the sea's favorite trick. No body, no closure, just absence. You held the mother's arm as she screamed, not because you wanted to, but because no one else did. She pounded the dock until her knuckles split, cursed the sky, cursed God, cursed the sea in words that didn't sound like hers. You said nothing. You watched the waves. You waited until her voice broke into nothing. The next morning, she went back to gutting fish. Grief here isn't loud for long. It can't be. There's too much to do. The nets won't haul themselves. The fish won't wait. And the world doesn't stop spinning just because yours did. The children who remain don't ask questions. They move around the gaps like they've always been there. They know the rules better than the adults. Don't lean over the side. Don't chase your ball into the surf. Don't turn your back to the tide. Don't run. Don't sing too loud. Don't breathe wrong. The sea hears everything, and sometimes it wants more. Some of the graves have names, some don't. Some are just small mounds of earth, marked with broken bits of boat or sea glass, or stones worn smooth by water. You pass them on the way to the nets, and you don't stop. You don't kneel. You don't leave flowers. The sea took them. The sea will take more. All you can do is keep walking. When it's your turn to look for them, your own, you count without speaking. You listen for their voices between the wind and the gulls and the groan of ropes. You check their hands for blood, their feet for frost, their eyes for the kind of glassy silence that means something got in and hasn't let go. You feed them whatever scraps you can spare. You lie and say it's enough. You wrap them in blankets at night and hold them tighter than you're supposed to. Because if you lose them, the sea will not say sorry. The sea does not give back what it takes, and it always takes. So you don't name your future. You don't dream too hard. You don't make promises. You keep your children close, and even that isn't close enough. Because out here, childhood isn't measured in years. It's measured in tides. You stink. Everyone does. It's not a failing, it's a fact. The sea won't let you forget it. The brine gets into everything. Your hair, your clothes, your breath, the skin between your fingers. That peels, no matter how carefully you wrap it. You stop noticing the smell after the first year, but others do. When someone new comes to the village, and rarely do they stay long, they wince like it's pain, like the air hurts. You've tried to wash. Once, long ago. You stripped to the waist and stepped into the tide, thinking the cold would numb the grime off. It didn't. It burned. Salt doesn't soothe. It finds the cracks in your skin, the cuts you didn't know were there, and it stings with the rage of an old god. You came out red, shivering, and dirtier than before. Seaweed clinging to your legs, sand in every fold. You never did it again. There's a bucket in the corner of your home. You ladle water from it each morning, splash your face, rinse your hands. The cloth you use was once white. It's gray now, stiff with salt and time. You rub it over your skin anyway. It doesn't help much. You still itch, still flake, still wake up with blood under your nails from scratching in your sleep. Your wounds don't heal. They close if you're lucky, but they never fade. The sea won't let you rest long enough. Rope burn turns to blisters. Blisters burst into ulcers. A nick from a rusted hook swells to the size of your thumb and fills with something that shouldn't be inside a body. You press it. It weeps. You wrap it in old linen and pretend it's fine. It has to be. Because the alternative is the healer. He lives at the edge of the village in a shack that was once a boathouse. Smells like fermented blood and herbs gone sour. No one goes to him unless the fever's already taken hold, unless the shaking won't stop, unless the wounds turned purple or black or green and you've started forgetting your own name. Then you crawl there, if you can, and hope he's sober enough to see straight. Sometimes he is, sometimes he isn't. He smells worse than the rest of us, which is saying something. His hands shake from drink, or age, or rot. His teeth are mostly gone. He'll give you a bitter draught of something made from roots and seawater, and if you don't throw it up, you might sleep for a few hours. But if the wound is bad, he reaches for the saw. He doesn't warn you. He doesn't ask. The saw is old and notched, and probably once belonged to a carpenter. He doesn't use heat, or prayer, or even clean rags. Just straps you down with rope and tells you to bite. You scream. Everyone does. If you don't, you're already dead. He cuts quick, but not fast enough. And afterward, he doesn't stitch. He just stuffs the stump with moss or wool, wraps it, and leaves you to God. More than once, he's taken the wrong limb. There's no follow-up care, no bandages changed, no checkups. You get back to work when you can stand again, or you don't, and the ground gets one more shallow grave. The sea infects everything. The air, the wounds, the water you drink from the barrel, even though you boil it twice. You try to keep your hands clean, but the fish guts stain, and the slime works into your knuckles, and the salt carves away what little protection your body still clings to. You bleed often, in places you didn't expect. Your gums, your eyes, Your nails. The healer says it's bad humors. You say nothing. You've learned there are no answers here, only endurance. You don't bathe. You don't heal. You endure until you don't. It starts with the sky. Not thunder, not lightning, just a shift, a weight. The clouds turn the color of old bruises, and the wind changes direction. The gulls go quiet. The dogs disappear. You don't need a bell or a warning cry. Everyone knows. The sea is about to take something back. You lash the boats, not because it'll help, but because you've been taught to try. You hammer stakes into ground already soft with yesterday's rain. You push barrels up against the doors. You carry the fish inside, even though you won't be able to eat for days if the salt stores flood. The children are told to stay in, but they don't listen. They want to see. They want to watch the sky open. It doesn't take long. The first wave doesn't roar. It rolls. A wall of black water that seems too quiet, too smooth, until it hits. You hear it first through the earth, a deep rumble that feels like something breathing just beneath your feet. Then it comes, over the dock, through the market stalls, into homes. It takes wood, fire, stone, people. No time to scream, no time to pray, just the sound of everything being unmade. Your door splits in two. You're still inside when the water comes, and it fills the room faster than your lungs can fill with air. You grab the ceiling beam. Your legs are gone. The table is gone. You see your neighbor float past the window like a puppet with its strings cut. You hold on. You don't blink. You just hold. Outside, it's worse. The church bell rings once. Just once. Then crashes into the sea with the rest of the tower. The boathouse collapses like it was never nailed together. Roofs disappear. Chimneys are ripped from their roots. People don't scream because no one can hear. The wind steals every sound. The rain feels like knives. You try to count how long it's been, but the sky stays the same, black and boiling. You don't know when it ends. It just slows. The wind stutters. The rain softens. The water begins to pull back, dragging what's left with it. Planks, beams, carts, bodies. The sea doesn't roar in triumph. It just recedes, quiet and satisfied, like a job well done. When you step outside, the village is gone. Not damaged. Gone. The path to the docks is a mud trench filled with salt. The fish drying racks are splinters. The netting shed is a smear of timbers half buried in sand. You walk where the baker's house used to be and find a single shoe stuck in the thatch of a tree. A boat sits upside down on top of a dead cow. The well is gone. The dead are everywhere. You find her hand first. Just the hand, reaching out from under the wreckage. You know the ring. You don't pull it free. You kneel. You whisper her name and feel the ground shake as another wave hits somewhere farther down the coast. You don't look up. No one writes about this. No one marks it down. There is no monk chronicling the dead. There is no official death toll. You bury the ones you can, if the ground will take them. If the earth hasn't turned to brine and sludge, if the bodies are still in one piece, the rest are left for the gulls. And by next season, the village isn't even a memory, just a name spoken with a shiver, a place where something used to be, where a bell once rang, where someone once laughed. Storms don't just destroy here, they erase. You don't mark the start of winter by a date. You mark it by the way the wind changes, sharper, hungrier. It snakes under doors, and through the holes in your cloak, needles its way down your spine even when the fire's still burning. You breathe, and the air hurts. You speak and your lips crack. There is no announcement, No first snow to marvel at, no beautiful frost to admire, just cold that seeps into your bones and stays there like an old grudge. The sea doesn't freeze all at once. First, it thickens at the edges, slow, silent glass that creeps across the shallows. Then one morning, the boats are crusted over, ropes frozen stiff, oars locked in place by a thin, invisible skin of ice that splinters at the touch. You wake to the sound of your own breath rasping in the air, like a dying bellows. The straw you sleep on is brittle. Dampness has turned to rime. The corners of the hut glitter, but not in a way that makes anyone smile. You try to work, but every motion costs more. The nets are frozen in coils. The sail crackles when you try to raise it. The tiller won't budge unless you pour hot water over it, and there's never enough firewood for that. You break your nails trying to pry open the storage chest. Inside, everything smells of mold and salt and death. You think of staying home. Then you remember the barrels are nearly empty. The fish must be caught, even now, especially now. So you go out. You always go out. The wind out on the water is crueler than the land. It doesn't howl. It cuts. Sleet rides in sideways, slicing into your face until you can't see. Your beard turns white with ice. The sea slaps the side of the boat hard enough to bruise. The waves don't rise high, but they twist in strange directions, churned by winds you can't see, born from storms farther north. Your boat groans. So does your back. Everything is slow. Everything is dangerous. Even the fish seem to vanish when it's this cold. The worst is the nights. Not because they're long, though they are, but because they don't end. You lie there under every blanket and skin you own, curled like a dried root, and you still shiver. Your toes go numb, and you stop trusting your own fingers. You think about lighting another fire, but the wood is damp, or gone, or frozen to the ground outside. You try to sleep, but the wind keeps waking you, or the pain, or the cold. Sometimes the livestock just stops moving. You check the pen in the morning and find the sheep rigid, their eyes open, frost crusting the wool around their noses. The chickens huddle and die in clumps. The goat doesn't bleat anymore, just stares. The pigs, if you had any, are already dead by now. You're next, probably, just slower. Even the tools betray you in winter. Iron cracks, wood snaps, rope becomes as brittle as bone. Your boots freeze to the floor. The nails in your roof expand and pop, letting in more of the very thing you're trying to keep out. You consider patching the gaps, but your hands shake too hard to thread the needle. And besides, you're tired. Too tired. The healer is already gone, died in his sleep or wandered into the woods after drinking something meant to warm the blood. No one's seen him in days. No one's looking either. What would be the point? No one can save you from the sky. You tell yourself it won't last, that the thaw will come, that spring is real, and not just a lie the priest tells when he's cold too. But then you wake up to find the fire's gone out, and your breath curls in the air like smoke from a dying candle, and you realize something. You are colder now than you were the night before, and tomorrow will be colder still. The church doors don't close all the way. They never have. The wind slides through them like it belongs there, rattling the warped wood, slipping past the hinges with a hiss. You kneel anyway. On cold stone, on splinters, on bones maybe. No one's moved. The floor tiles in generations. It's dark, even in the day, with candles burned down to nubs and the smell of wax clinging to the air like regret. You clasp your hands, because that's what you were taught. You bow your head, though your neck aches and your stomach turns with hunger, and you pray. You don't ask for much anymore. Not safety, not warmth, just not worse. You pray for not worse. The priest tells you God sees everything, that suffering is holy, that your pain earns a reward you can't yet understand. He says the storm was a test, that the fever is a lesson, that the dead child in the next hut was chosen. Chosen for what, he doesn't say. Just a pause, a sigh, a silent shrug that smells of incense and surrender. He says all things serve a purpose in the eyes of the Lord. But he doesn't fish. He doesn't bleed into the net. He doesn't cough up black phlegm in the middle of the night and wonder if this time it means the end. His hands are clean. His belly isn't hollow. His fire is always lit. You say amen anyway, because it's the only thing you can say without risking damnation. Or worse, attention. Because doubt is dangerous, not just for your soul, but for your place. In a village like this, doubt is a loose plank. Step wrong and you fall through. So you sing the hymns, hoarse and tuneless. You give your last dried herring to the offering plate and watch it disappear into the priest's cellar. You kneel when the bells ring. You chant when the sky darkens. And when the fog rolls in too thick, you light your candle and whisper the old prayers just in case. Not the Latin ones, the ones your grandmother said in the dark. The ones with no saints, no glory, no promise. Just survival. The sea doesn't listen. You know this. Everyone knows this. You prayed for your brother when the boat capsized. You shouted his name into the waves and offered everything you owned. He didn't come back. Neither did the boat. The priest said it was God's will, that some lives are given to teach others. But he didn't say what it was supposed to teach you exactly. How to be empty. How to forget. You went back the next day and worked like nothing had happened. You prayed for the storm to spare the animals. It didn't. You prayed for your daughter's fever to break. It didn't. You prayed for the salt to last through winter, for the nets not to tear, for the raiders to pass by just once. None of it worked. You still pray, but not with hope, with habit, with muscle memory. The church is quiet most days, cold and hollow, like everything else out here. You sit beside others but speak to no one. You hear the sniffles, the stifled sobs, the clink of coin given out of fear more than faith. You see the same blank stares, the same sunken eyes that say, we're all pretending together, pretending there's reason in the drowning, that the wind is sacred, that the hunger is divine. Sometimes you think about walking to the altar and asking outright, why? Why the children? Why the frostbite and the rot and the storms that come too fast to name? But you don't. Because you already know what the answer will be. Or worse, that there won't be one at all. So, you stay silent. You light your candle. You press your forehead to cold stone and mouth the words. Not because you believe, because you're afraid to stop. The fog comes in so thick, it eats sound. You can't tell how far you are from shore. You can't even hear the gulls. The boat creaks under you, timber shifting like bones grinding in a cold joint, and the water slaps gently against the hull in a rhythm that feels too slow, too patient. You clutch the oar tighter and squint into the gray, but it's like looking into wet cloth. The world ends 5 feet from your nose. That's when you see it. At first, it's just a shape, low, black, unmoving. Could be a rock, could be another boat, but rocks don't sway like that. Boats don't breathe. You row closer, against your better judgment, against the warning that coils in your spine. You tell yourself it's just driftwood, a barrel, maybe salvage. You could use salvage. Then it lifts, not quickly, not violently, just slowly, as if waking. The sea itself seems to rise with it, something vast and slick and bloated, arching up from beneath the waves with the indifference of age. A mass of pale flesh, blotched and veined, covered in deep gashes that ooze something black and foul-smelling. You see an eye, or what used to be an eye, just a sunken pit rimmed with rot. You don't scream. You don't breathe. You just stare. And then, just as silently, it sinks back down, disappears into the fog. No splash, no ripple, like it was never there at all. Later, you tell yourself it was a dead whale. Just that, a carcass caught in the tide. But you've seen whales. Even dead, they don't move like that. And they don't carry ropes embedded in their skin or pieces of timber jammed between their ribs like broken teeth. You think maybe it was a ship once. Maybe it was many ships. Or maybe it was something older. Something that drifted up from where the sea forgets the names of things. The old men say, monsters aren't real, not anymore. That the great serpents and leviathans went out with the pagans. That what you see is just fear with a shadow. But those same men wear charms, carved from bone and spit over their shoulders when the mist rolls in. They hang dried fish above their doors, upside down, like some kind of warning or invitation. You've heard the stories. Everyone has. A cousin lost at sea. His boat found days later empty but undamaged, the wood scored with marks that look like claws. A wreck washed ashore, the mast bent into a perfect circle, no bodies aboard, just slime and a smell that made the dogs run yelping into the hills. A sailor who came back wrong, eyes too wide, skin too smooth. Never spoke again, just stared at the tide, until one day he waited out and didn't return. You don't talk about these things during daylight, but when the fire burns low and the wind shifts, people remember. They tell tales of gills in the fog and arms that end in barbs, of pale hands that slap the hull just once before vanishing, of things too big, too quiet, too deliberate, things that wait beneath, never seen clearly, only glimpsed in the moment between sight and sleep. You don't believe in monsters. Not exactly. But you believe in what the sea does to bodies. You've seen drowned men, so twisted they no longer look like men. Eyes swollen shut, skin flayed by salt, bellies bloated, and limbs bent backward. You've pulled things from the waves that shouldn't be whole, that feel too soft, that don't bleed right. You believe in what the sea makes of you when you stare too long into its heart. You believe that some shapes in the mist aren't ships or whales or driftwood. You believe because you have to. Because out here, the line between myth and memory is as thin as fog. And it always comes back. You stop looking at the horizon after a while. Not because it's boring, because it moves. Not fast, not in ways you can point at, but just enough that your stomach starts to question what your eyes are saying. A line that wobbles where it shouldn't. A smudge that won't disappear. Shapes that vanish the moment you blink. You tell yourself it's the light, the wind, the mist. You lie to yourself because it's safer than the truth. The sea changes things, and it doesn't always change them back. You've seen it happen. Good men. Sharp-eyed, strong, laughing on the way out, hands steady on the oars, mouths full of crude jokes and salted bread. They leave in the morning and row into the mist. When they return, something's gone behind their eyes. Their movements are slower. Their words don't line up. They stare too long at nothing, their mouths twitching like they're tasting something foul. Some don't speak at all, others don't stop. One man came back singing to the nets. Not a hymn, not any tune you knew. Just low, guttural noise, the same 4 tones over and over, like he was calling something up from below. He kept his face to the sea, even when we docked. Took 3 of us to pull him off the boat. He didn't fight, just smiled like he knew something we didn't. That smile lasted until he bit off his own tongue. Another began feeding his food to the gulls. Every meal. Didn't matter how hungry he was. Said they needed it more. That they were carrying messages for him. He stood on the cliff one night and flapped his arms like wings, shrieking. When they found him in the morning, he was barefoot and bloodied, staring at the waves like he'd been waiting for a reply. The priest says it's isolation, hunger, exposure. He calls it fisherman's fever, as if putting a name on it makes it smaller. But we know better. It's the silence out there, the weight of it. You think silence means peace, but this silence pulses. It's thick, alive, the kind of silence that presses into your ears until you start imagining things just to fill it. Things you're not sure you imagined at all. Sometimes you hear voices, not words, just murmurs, like someone is standing behind you on the boat, breathing softly. Sometimes it sounds like your mother, or your child, or someone long dead. You whip around and see nothing but water, endless and gray. You laugh at first, then you stop laughing. You try to talk to yourself, keep your thoughts in order, but the sea doesn't like chatter. The waves slap the hull just loud enough to interrupt. The wind steals half your words, and eventually, even your own voice starts sounding strange. Like it's coming from farther away than it should. Like it isn't really yours. The ones who lose it completely, we bury them quietly. If they're lucky, they die on land. If not, we find their boat drifting days later, nets full of rotted fish and their bodies curled in corners, eyes wide open, and mouths stuffed with seaweed, or nothing at all. Just an empty craft, everything inside soaked and claw-marked. No sign of a struggle, no blood, just absence, echoing like a bell. You keep working. You keep rowing. You force yourself to speak, even if it's nonsense. You whistle. You hum. You pray to anything that will listen, even if it's not God. Because once the silence takes hold, it gets harder to remember what you sounded like before. Harder to remember you were ever anything but alone. The sea doesn't kill you all at once. It unthreads you, gently. Pulls your mind apart like an old net, strand by strand, until the only thing left is the whisper of waves and a name you barely remember. He kissed your forehead before he left. You remember that. Not because it was sweet, though it was, but because it felt final, like the gesture of a man who knew the sea was watching. He said he'd be back before dusk. They always say that. Before the tide turns, before the light fades, before you start to worry. That was 3 winters ago. You waited through the night, stoking the fire too high, pretending the flicker on the wall was just shadows and not fear. The next morning, you walked to the edge of the dock and watched the horizon until your knees gave out. You weren't alone. There were 3 of you. 4, if you count the girl still hoping her father would appear from the mist, bucket in hand, smile on his face. He didn't. You buried nothing. There was no body, no boat, no broken mast washing up in the shallows. Just a silence that settled into your chest and hasn't left since. Widow is what they call you now, but that word feels too clean, too simple. It doesn't capture the way the grief wraps around your ankles like soaked linen, how it clings in the corners of the house, in the unused bowls, the dent in the bed, the tools rusting where he left them. It doesn't capture how other women look at you, not with pity, but with recognition, as if to say, you too, because this is what marriage is here. Not a bond, not a beginning, a countdown. Your mother was widowed by 30, her mother even younger. No one talks about your great-grandmother. They say she wore black for so long the dye faded into the skin on her hands. They say her husband died screaming during a storm, lashed to the mast so the sea wouldn't drag him down. They say she never smiled again. You believe all of it. You married because you had to. Because mouths needed feeding and backs needed warming and someone had to hold the nets. Love was a luxury. You learned to care over time, through shared silence, through work, through the steady rhythm of survival. And then he was gone, swallowed, like all the rest. The priest tells you to be strong, that you'll see him again, that heaven holds every sailor lost to the sea. But when you close your eyes, you don't see golden gates. You see the water closing over his face. You see the way he might have clawed at the sky as the cold took hold. You hear the final creak of the hull giving way. You wonder if he thought of you or just of breath, of light, of pain. You keep working, because there's no choice. Because someone has to mend the nets and salt the catch and chase the gulls from the drying racks. Because the boy, your boy, is almost old enough to row, and the thought of that swallows you whole some nights. You don't stop him, though. You wrap his hands in cloth to guard against rope burn. You whisper the same prayer your husband once did. You teach him to watch the clouds, the tide, the gulls. You watch him step into the boat for the first time and force your face into something that looks like encouragement. But deep down, you know, you're preparing him for a trade with one outcome. You're raising your own grief in advance. They will call you strong, brave, steady. But none of that will matter when the sea comes calling again. And it always does. He's 6 the first time he's handed a knife. A small one, rust along the edge, bone handle smoothed by decades of hands before his. You show him how to hold the herring still, where to press, where to slice. He cuts wrong. Of course he does. You expect it. The blade nicks his thumb, and for a second, he just stares at the blood like it's something unfamiliar. Then he wipes it on his tunic and keeps working. No tears, just grit. That's when you know he'll survive. Maybe. There's no time for toys here. No carved horses or painted whistles. The only things they hold are tools, gutting knives, bale buckets, splintered oars. If they're lucky, a bit of bone to chew on, or a smooth rock to press into the dirt when the tide's out. Laughter exists, but it's brief, thin, like smoke from wet wood. It flickers during chores, in rare bursts. A joke told while hauling nets, a song hummed while scrubbing salt from skin. But it's not carefree. It never has been. You work because your parents did, and your parents worked because theirs had no other choice. This is the inheritance. Not land, not wealth, not wisdom, just labor, passed down like eye color or the shape of a jaw. From the moment a child can stand without falling, they're useful. That's what childhood means here. To use. They wake with the gulls, sleep with the wind howling against thin walls. The youngest feed the fires, clean the fish, chase the rats from the storehouse. The older ones row, cast nets, hold the lines when the boats threaten to tip. No one waits for them to grow into strength. Strength comes because it must, or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, the sea will notice. There is no school, just knowledge learned in bruises and blisters. You teach them how to tie knots before they can spell their own names. You teach them how to dress wounds and bind fingers snapped in the ice. You teach them what it sounds like when a wave hits wrong, how it means they have 10 seconds to grab something solid or drown. You do not teach them dreams. There's a girl in the village who once asked for a doll, just a rag tied up with thread. You tried to make one, but the fabric kept unraveling. It wouldn't hold shape. The stuffing fell out. She looked at it, then looked at the fish she was scaling, and said nothing. She's 10 now, and stronger than most of the men. Sometimes you see glimpses of childhood in the quiet moments. A boy running barefoot over the sand, kicking up shells. A girl tracing patterns in the frost on a window. But always, it ends too soon. Someone calls, something breaks. A scream echoes from the shore, and they're pulled back into the work like they never left. They bleed like you. They cry like you. But no one waits for them to be ready. You've buried children too small to lift their own buckets. You've seen them pulled from the sea, skin blue, mouths full of foam, fingers still clutching the line. You've seen them waste away from cold, from hunger, from infections that should have been treatable but weren't, because no one here has time to be sick or young. Sometimes you wonder what it would have been like if things were different, if your boy could have learned to read, if your daughter had paper to draw on instead of gutting knives and fish guts, if laughter didn't feel like a sin. But you don't wonder long. There's work to do. And dreaming out loud only makes the silence afterward worse. Here, childhood doesn't end. It simply never begins. You walk there sometimes, even when no one's been buried that week. The graveyard clings to the edge of the headland like it's trying not to slide into the sea, the stone wall cracked and weeping with moss. The crosses lean with the wind, hunched like fishermen resting after too many storms. Every one of them faces east, toward the water, as if even in death they're watching for something to return, or warning something not to come closer. No one remembers who chose that direction. It wasn't a priest. It wasn't a decree. It just became the way of things. You dig the grave shallow because the ground won't let you go deep. Too rocky, too salted, too full of bones already laid. You mark the ones you can with wood, sometimes stone if you have it. But the names wear away fast. Wind doesn't care about memory. You buried your brother there first, or at least what was left of him. The sea spat him back 4 days after he disappeared in a storm, bloated and broken, his hands curled into fists like he was still fighting. You wrapped him in sailcloth, prayed without knowing the words, and lowered him into the earth that didn't want to open. When the tide rose that evening, you swore you saw something bobbing out near the rocks. You didn't go look. Some families have whole rows, father, son, grandson, all lined up, all turned to the sea, like it might say sorry. You know it won't. It never has. You bring the dead here because there's nowhere else. The forest is too far, the hills too shallow, the bog too wet, so the sea gets to watch them forever, even if it's the thing that killed them. It feels like cruelty. Or maybe it's honesty. The sea took their breath, their bones, their futures. It should have to look them in the eye. The priest blesses each grave, mumbling Latin over the wind's howl, his robes soaked through with salt air. No one listens too closely. No one expects it to work. It's tradition, not salvation. You toss a coin into the dirt for the ferryman, though no one can say where that idea came from either. Pagan maybe. Heresy, probably. But you do it anyway, just in case. You've stood there in every kind of weather. In sleet so sharp it opened your knuckles. In fog so thick you couldn't see the hole in the ground until you tripped over it. In wind that knocked the words from your mouth mid-prayer. You buried children there. Lovers. Strangers pulled from wrecks with no one to claim them. You never dig just one grave anymore. Always 2, maybe 3. The sea rarely takes only once. The church bell used to ring for every burial, but now it's rusted and cracked, and no one can be spared to fix it. So now you mark the dead with silence, a quiet walk, a bowed head, and then back to work, because the tide doesn't wait, not even for grief. Sometimes, at night, the headstones glow faintly in the moonlight, streaked with salt, speckled with lichen. From a distance, they look like teeth, like the land itself is trying to bite back. You sit by your brother's cross sometimes, your hands deep in your pockets, your eyes locked on the waves. You don't say much. He wouldn't expect it. The wind shifts. The tide rolls in. You count the graves and try not to count the names still living, because you know more are coming. You feel it in your ribs, in the air, in the quiet dread that never really leaves. Every grave faces the sea, and the sea never looks away. The first thing that would kill you is the cold. Not the kind you're used to. The kind you can ward off with radiators and steaming coffee and overpriced fleece. This cold gets in before you're awake. It waits in the spaces between your ribs and under your fingernails. It clings to the floor, the straw, the very air. You'd open your eyes and inhale your first medieval breath, and it would already hurt. The damp would be in your bones before your feet even hit the floor. The second thing would be the smell. Fish, mostly, but not the fresh kind. Fish that's been dried, rotted, re-dried, salted beyond taste, and left hanging in thick knots like death's own laundry. Add mold, add sweat, add the unwashed bodies of every person in the village. Throw in smoke from peat fires that don't vent properly, and animal dung frozen into the packed earth just outside the door. You'd gag before your second step. You might vomit. That would be a mistake, because the food would be next. Breakfast, if there is one, would be a piece of bread so hard you'd think it was carved, soaked in brine to soften it. Maybe a scrap of dried fish, chewy and sour, or a scoop of porridge that smells faintly of mildew. You wouldn't finish it. Your stomach would reject it, but there wouldn't be anything else. No tea, no fruit, no gentle wake-up routines, just salt, smoke, and the sound of someone coughing so deep it sounds like they're drowning. You'd try to dress. You'd find your coat laughable, soft fabric, insulated, clean. It would mark you instantly as something wrong. Your shoes wouldn't last an hour. Your skin would betray you in minutes, too soft, too unscarred. Hands with no calluses mean you don't work, which means you don't belong, and not belonging here is dangerous. By midday, you'd be pressed into labor, not asked, not given time, just expected. Carry that net, gut that fish, patch that roof before the storm rolls in, and you wouldn't know how. Not really. Not with your modern joints and your soft fingers and your clean, unused muscles. You'd drop something, you'd break something, and someone would shout, or worse, stare. Judgment here doesn't come with words. It comes with absence, with no help, with no shared food, with no protection when the cold grows teeth. You'd think to protest, maybe speak up, but your language wouldn't quite match. The rhythm of your speech would sound odd, your vowels misplaced. The way you carry yourself, your hesitation, your disbelief, would all scream outsider. You'd be a curiosity at first, then a nuisance, then a threat. You'd try to wash your hands. You'd try to ask for clean water. You'd avoid touching raw meat, dirt, animals. That would seal it. Because here, the dirt is part of life. You clean with sand. You bathe with spit and seawater. You eat with fingers. You bleed and bandage and go back to work. Your caution would look like arrogance. Your discomfort would read as insult. By nightfall, you'd be exhausted in a way you've never known. Not tired, depleted. Your shoulders burning from rope strain. Your back twisted from lifting. Your stomach cramped from bad food and worse water. The fire would be too low. The straw too wet. The lice would find you, and you'd scratch until your skin broke. And even then, you wouldn't sleep, because the wind would howl, the walls would groan, the sea would whisper its threats, just beyond the edge of hearing. And in the morning, they'd expect you to do it all again, without complaint, without pause. You wouldn't make it that far. You'd be dead before your second son. The only mercy? No one would remember your name. They should have died. All of them. Every man who stepped into a boat with tar-soaked seams and prayers where there should have been planks. Every woman who gave birth beside a smoky fire on a dirt floor, blood soaking into wool and straw, salt in her throat and fever in her bones. Every child who walked barefoot through frostbitten mud to haul fish twice their size. They should have died. The cold alone should have swallowed them, but somehow they didn't. They built lives anyway. Not the kind of lives that go in books, gilded and noble and full of feasts. No, these were quiet lives, bitter, grit-covered, bent-backed, but not broken. They mended nets with fingers too stiff to grip. They salted fish until their eyes stung and their lungs rasped, and still they worked until the barrel was full. They patched roofs with seaweed, boiled moss when the stew ran dry, buried their children, and rose the next day to milk goats and gather driftwood. They sang, too. Not beautifully, maybe, but honestly. Low, lilting songs that blended with the wind, half-forgotten verses passed down through cracked lips and frost-chapped tongues. Songs about storms and saints and the things that watched from the waves. Songs that didn't promise safety, just survival. And sometimes that was enough. They told stories. Around fires, under blankets too thin, while the wind clawed at the doors like something alive. Stories about giants and sea witches and gods who walked the shoreline disguised as beggars. Stories that explained the things no priest could. The drowned, the fog, the flashes of light on the horizon when there were no stars. They laughed at the stories, but they remembered them. And sometimes they believed them. Especially when the sea got quiet. Too quiet. They didn't live because it was easy, or safe, or fair. They lived because they had to, because the sea gave no alternatives. It demanded labor, blood, sometimes bones. But in return, it gave fish. And fish meant warmth, trade, coins, weddings, life. It was never charity. It was always a bargain. And still, they launched the boats. Every morning, knowing the odds, knowing the names etched into crosses on the hill, knowing what it felt like to wait and not see sails on the horizon. They stepped into waterlogged decks and grabbed the oars and pushed out past the rocks. Not because they didn't fear the sea, but because the fear had no say. They carried their dead with them, in memory, in habit, in the way they tied knots or carved runes into the hull. You could always tell who had lost someone. Their movements were sharper, more careful, not slower, just different. As if they knew how little margin there was between the living and whatever came after. But they also married. They danced. They carved bits of beauty into their days. A bone button shaped like a seal, a shawl dyed with crushed berries, a name given to a baby that meant storm-born or light after dark. They built something with every hour that didn't kill them. You might call it stubbornness. They would have called it life. Not a life anyone would envy. Not one you'd choose if you had a choice. But a life pulled from the teeth of the sea and held fast, breath by breath, despite everything. And when they looked out at the water, gray, endless, shifting, they didn't ask for mercy. They asked for just one more day.